Krishna, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, he built a house in which the whole world can live. There is no harm, Prabhupada said. Krishna does not make distinction, female dress or male dress. I mean to say the female body is weaker, but spiritually the body does not matter. In the absence of Lord Nityananda, his wife Jhanavi Devi was preaching, first you must understand the philosophy. You must be prepared to answer questions. Krishna will give you intelligence. Just like I was not prepared to answer all these questions, but Krishna gives intelligence. After 8 days in his New York City home, Prabhupada went to Buffalo. At State University of New York at Buffalo, Rupanuga was teaching an accredited course in Krishna Yoga with some 60 students enrolled, regularly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra on beats. Prabhupada stayed for a few days, lecturing and initiating disciples. Then he went to Boston for more initiations and several marriages. Shishikodanitaya Mahapurusha Ki Jai, His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, the appearance of the demon Vritra Sura. We'll do text 28, 29, and 30. Recite together 29 and 30. I'll do 28 myself. Shishuka uvacha ititisha maharaja suranam upatishtatam pratichyam dishya bud avi shanka chakra gadadhara. Translation. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, My dear king, when all the demigods offered him their prayers, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Hari, carrying his weapons, the conch shell, disc, and club, appeared first within their hearts and then before them. Now text 29:30. Atma tulyai shoda shabir. Atma tulyai shoda shabir. Vina Shrivatsa Kaustubau. Vina Shrivatsa Kaustubau. Paryupasitam unidra. Paryupasitam unidra. Sharad amburu hekshanam. Sharadamburu hekshanam. Drishtvatam avanau sarva. Drishtvatam avanau sarva. Ikshanaglada viklava. Ikshanaglada viklava. Dandavat patitarajan. Dandavat patitarajan. Chanairutaya tushtuvu. Chanairutaya tushtuvu. Atmatulyai shodashabir. Vinashrivatsa kaustubau. Paryupasitam unidra. Sharad amburu hekshanam. Drishtvatam avanau sarva. Ikshanaglada viklava. Dandavat patitarajan. Chanairutaya tushtuvu. Vinashrivatsa kaustubau. Paryupasitam unidra. Sharadam buru hekshanam. Drishtvatam avano sarva. Ikshana glada viklava. Dandavat patitarajan. Chanairutaya tushtuvu. Atmatulyai shodashabir. Vinashrivatsa kaustubau. Paryupasitam unidra. Sharadam buru hekshanam. Drishtvatam avano sarva. Ikshana glada viklavaha. Dandavat patitarajan. Chanairutaya tushtuvu. Atmatulyai. Almost equal to himself. Shodashabi. By 16 servants. Vina. Without. Shrivatsa Kaustubau. The Shrivatsa mark and Kaustuba jewel. Paryupasitam. Being attended on all sides. Unidra. Blooming. Sharad. Of the autumn. Amburuha. Like lotus flowers. Ikshanam. Having eyes. Drishtva. Seeing. Tam. Him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. Avano. On the ground. Sarve. All of them. Ikshana. From directly seeing. Ahlada. With happiness. Viklavaha. Being overwhelmed. Dandavat. Like a stick. Patita. Fell. Rajan. O king. Shanai. slowly. Utaya, standing up. Tushtuvu, offered prayers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Surrounding and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, wear 16 personal attendants decorated with ornaments and appearing exactly like him, but without the mark of Shivatsa and the Kaustubha jewel. O king, when all the demigods saw the Supreme Lord in that posture, smiling with eyes like the petals of lotuses grown in autumn, they were overwhelmed with happiness and immediately fell down like rods, offering dandavats. Then they slowly rose and pleased the Lord by offering him prayers. Responsibly, please. Surrounding and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, were 16 personal attendants, decorated with ornaments and appearing exactly like him, but without the marks of Shivatsa and the Kaustuba jewel. O king, when all the demigods saw the Supreme Lord in that posture, smiling with eyes like the petals of lotuses, grown in autumn, they were overwhelmed with happiness and immediately fell down like rods, offering dandavats. Then they slowly rose and pleased the Lord by offering him prayers. Report. In Vaikuntha Loka, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has 4 hands and decorations like the Srivatsa mark on his chest and the gem known as Kaustuba. These are special indications of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord's personal attendants and other devotees in Vaikuntha have the same features except for the Srivatsa mark and the Kaustuba gem. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कंचना गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणममि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवत्स आदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वचलं पंगुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारणम् by the mercy of spiritual master, blind man can see the stars, lame man can cross the mountains, and dumb man can speak eloquently. I therefore offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. So the translation again, surrounding and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, were 16 personal attendants, decorated with ornaments and appearing exactly like him, but without the marks of Srivatsa and the Kaustuba jewel. O king, when all the demigods saw the Supreme Lord in that posture, smiling with eyes like the petals of lotuses grown in autumn, They were overwhelmed with happiness and immediately fell down like rods, offering dandavats. Then they slowly rose and pleased the Lord by offering him prayers. So you can see how fortunate here are demigods to have a darshan of the Lord and see the Lord with all his opulences. And as we read, leading to these verses, that there is a certain qualification is required to see the Lord, and it is this is the aspiration of devotee, is to come to the point, and this whole Krishna consciousness processes that to develop devotion and purity of the heart and qualification adhikar in order to be able to see the Lord face to face. So I just wanted to mention that Prabhupada Prana Prabhu was scheduled to give a class, but he's dropping somebody to airport, so I'm covering him. So it's be a bit spontaneous class. So as we read recently to leading these verses, those who are putting themselves in the center, who are trying to lord it over material existence, who are proud, who are trying to challenge and compete with God, they cannot see the Lord. The Lord has covers himself. Avajananti mamudha, that those who are uh, grossly foolish, who are mudas, who are uh, competing with the Supreme Lord, they cannot see the Lord. So the qualification for seeing the Lord is to change our attitude from putting ourselves in the center and trying to bring Krishna in the center, cultivating humility. I just was listening to Mahatma Prabhu just a couple of days ago. He was saying, and that's what Sanatana Goswami says, so he just kind of presenting and sharing with us the teachings of Acharyas, that prema and danya, humility, are synonymous. It's such an important principle for us to learn, and I'm speaking just theoretically myself, by the way, but something that we should be all aspiring for. If we're looking for prema and love or true love, it has to be accompanied directly with humility. Because what happens if there is no humility, when we come across even material existence, we come across somebody who is got something special. You know, like Krishna, we're reading, is so beautiful and so wonderful, so attractive, and has such a wonderful qualities and strength and fame and knowledge and renunciation. Everything is absolutely fantastic and wonderful about the Lord. But if you act humility, if we are proud, the pride means that we want those things for ourselves. So I want to be a center of attention. I want to be the strong, at least in my village or in my family, or at least in my mind. We want to put ourselves. I'm a little bit stronger than this person. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable. I can give a little bit better class than this person. So somehow or another we're trying to find that I'm not the worst, but I'm a little bit better, at least personally speaking, a little bit better than somebody else. So, or if I'm not good at this, I'm good at something else. And it's like almost like subconsciously we're always doing that and comparing ourselves with others and trying to say, okay, or if nothing else, then we can criticize others, so then we feel ourselves better. I'm not so bad because this other person is doing this and that and a third thing not right. So this is material consciousness, and that prevents us from seeing the Lord and appreciating the Lord's beauty. So therefore, in material consciousness, when we come across somebody who is in some way better than us, uh, it manifests in different ways. If in a mode of ignorance, when we come across somebody better, then we want to drag them down, try by criticizing or by fault finding or by becoming angry at them, envious, and envy can manifest in like some, like violence and all kind of things. So conditioned soul as well, when it comes in mode of ignorance, comes across, somebody who's wonderful like Krishna. You can see when Krishna was around, it's not that everybody just appreciated Krishna's existence. There were some people who were just blaspheming Krishna, fault finding Krishna, while he's completely faultless and perfect. Shishupal was finding like so many faults with Krishna because he had this envious attitude. He wanted to be in Krishna's position. So it's just like uh, he was like finding so many faults. So this is coming across. We come across some value, and we are in this mode of ignorance. So we're gonna try to drag down and become envious. Then in a mode of passion, when we come across some value, then we want to compete. And then we want to compete, okay, this is somebody's got this value, but I can do better. But or I can, so it's kind of more on the jealousy side, because envy is to drag down, but jealousy, you want to compete and outdo somebody who has got better value than us. So that's also not humility, because we're trying to be more knowledgeable. We're trying to learn more shlokas that somebody else. I mean, it's not just necessarily that somebody is learning shlokas, they're in a mode of passion, but if the motivation for learning lots of shlokas is to become, I got know the most shlokas in the temple, uh, to outdo someone, then it's not. That is a mode of passion. That's not. Um, and that's not doesn't lead in a pure devotion, or whatever the case may be, strength or fame or beauty. Of course, devotees shave their heads, and they are not necessarily looking to look good, but when you may start competing, I want to be most effulgent devotee in the temple, when the purity shines through. You can see, some of these devotees, they almost like reflecting the light of Krishna. Prabhupada said, these are the Vaikuntha devotees, because they become like a purified, start becoming effulgent. But if you want to become the most effulgent in the temple, that's again becomes like a mode of passion. So, mode of goodness, and this is something that leads to transcendence. When we come across of some value in somebody else, we appreciate it, we glorify it, we appreciate it, we are not disturbed about it, or at least in the beginning maybe we are disturbed, but we try to control this urge of being disturbed that somebody is better than us, but we appreciate and glorify it, glorify that person, glorify the quality, appreciate in our mind, share with other devotees, and in that way we are battling this envy in our heart, for because of which in the first place we are here. And personally speaking, when you come across Krishna consciousness, come across somebody wonderful like Krishna, in the beginning, to hear Krishna's glories, it is a little bit austere. To hear somebody who is so wonderful, who's so attractive, who is so famous and strong or powerful, and etc. The mind may not be necessarily so pleased to hear those glories. And therefore we understand that is not something wrong with Krishna, because sometimes conditioned mind, may think, oh, like that's what happens to Shishupal. It just gets carried away with that feeling in the heart, and starts like almost expressing and blaspheming and etc. Krishna. But actually we understand that there is impurities in our heart is the problem, and this is the root cause of my material existence, because I cannot appreciate Krishna's glories, and technically speaking, I would like to be, a little bit in Krishna's position, or maybe in a very, very large degree in Krishna's position. And often we don't realize that until we start practicing Krishna consciousness and going deeper and deeper and deeper then we start realizing these deep-rooted desires in the heart, competitive spirit to Krishna, and wanting to take his position. So, like when we sit down to chant his name and etc., and hear his glories, it can be a bit austere because we would like to hear our own lila, especially during japa. So, is it what kind of lila you would like to become absorbed during the japa period? Our own lila of what they did today, or what they're gonna do tomorrow, or what needs to be done, and other things that is going on. Kind of drama. In one sense, we all are going through our drama, especially in Kali Yuga. Our karma is such that there is a lot of drama in our life. So you may be kind of meditating on that drama, etc. And as mentioned, comparing ourselves with others, and where I am in this whole situation, and what is my, false ego comes in. I don't want to get anybody depressed, but we're trying to break it down a little bit and gonna move to more positive stuff. So this false ego as well is always trying to find for us some place in this universe, or somewhere. If the universe is here, so somewhere around the center of the universe. So that's the function of false ego. Uh, but we want to bring Krishna into that situation, and this is where the love starts, and it requires some humility and some realization that I'm not so great, and Krishna is great. And it's not doesn't require so much effort to realize that we are not great, and if we are thinking that we are, then Krishna will give us opportunity to realize that we are not the center of the universe. If you just prepare to eat that humble pie, so that's the price. That's the price to get Krishna. Is that we need to be prepared to eat a humble pie, and it may not be tasty in the beginning, and in due course of time it becomes tasty and delicious, the humble pie. But in the beginning, like anything in Krishna consciousness, Rupa Goswami, it says in Upadeshamrita that the Lord's names and qualities and pastimes and paraphernalia, everything in relationship with Krishna is transcendentally sweet, like sugar candy. But one who is afflicted by the jaundice, the disease of avidya, it cannot taste anything sweet. So avidya includes this envy, this contamination, impurity, big false ego, self-centeredness, and etc. All this kind of stuff is preventing us to taste the sweetness of Krishna, because it arises those qualities in us, and those qualities, they don't taste sweet, they taste actually very bitter, and therefore everything in relationship with Krishna will taste bitter, and humility as well. It tastes very bitter in the beginning for the false ego. But by serving, we need to acquire the service attitude. When we realize our situation and position, we don't want to stay in that situation. We should realize that this is causing me a misery, birth after birth after birth. There's so much competition, or dragging other people down to look oneself better, or just competing, trying to get at the top in your village, or in your city, or in your family, or among your friends, or internationally. Somehow or another, establish oneself in my country, my nationality, or my family, or my false ego. Somehow or another, to find some credit where I can establish myself. We should become exhausted by that. This is the real beginning of spiritual life, when you become materially exhausted from all that, never-ending competition, etc. And of course, it can come. We can bring that mentality in Krishna consciousness. We become materially exhausted and tired, and we now say, "Okay, I'm gonna serve now in Krishna consciousness very sincerely," and we do, and we start then becoming purified and etc. And then, you know, Krishna can then empower us, and we start doing some nice things, like we can lead this very nice kirtan or give a nice class or do some very wonderful service and etc. And then again, you know, we can start feeling a little bit in a center, or maybe a lot in a center. So it is an ongoing battle. uh, it's kind of easier to be humble when you kind of completely failed in material life, and that has brought us to material existence. But we're starting excelling in the spiritual life, and then that ego can start coming back again. So therefore, the essence of devotee's life is a spirit of devotion. Whether giving a small service or a big service, we should always remember this is service, and this is to serve the devotees, serve the Lord, serve the spiritual master, and we should not be attached, you know, to whatever service we've been giving. If another service is given, we then should be ready to do another service. So and that's the heart, you know, of devotion of devotees, and it is opposite. The service is opposite of envy, is opposite of criticism, and it is synonymous with love. So if we want to serve, or we maybe in the beginning we do it kind of reluctantly, but we understand that this is the way to go, this is the way to happiness, and I'm become exhausted. I'm so tired of trying to put myself in the center. I don't want to do this anymore. I want now to put Krishna in the center, spiritual master in the center, devotees, and this is the way to happiness. And we start endeavoring. And of course, there will be many ups and downs and challenges and difficulties on this path. But we should be prepared, you know, whenever we get lost and get carried away by our false ego, and come back to this essential center of our existence, that I am a servant of the servant of the servant of the maintainer of the gopis of Krishna. And this is our eternal constitutional position. And the practice of devotional service, the chanting and the reading and the hearing and chanting, is to purify us and bring us to this eternal constitutional position. So whenever we can acting in that space, in that capacity, in that mood, that is the success. We're acting in our eternal constitutional position, and is kind of reviving our eternal nature. And whenever the false ego rises, and you know, we should then kind of switch the alarm that I'm actually getting lost. I'm going away from my eternal constitutional position. I'm becoming forgetful of who I am actually am, you know, which is a, you know, an eternal humble servant of the Lord. And as we move on, so in the beginning, it may be just the glimpses that we get, you know, when in a good space, in a good consciousness, but then we'll be appreciate the beauty of Krishna. As we read here, Krishna is so wonderful and so beautiful. He's got this blooming eyes. You know, there's such a beautiful season in spring when the flower starts blooming. You know, after this very dark winter, and everything is white in the winter, or, you know, when there is snow, or you know, things become brown. If you don't have so much snow, you can appreciate Krishna's beauty from this dark, you know, existence of birth after birth after birth. When we eventually start appreciating Krishna's beauty, just like the flowers bloom in the spring, is very refreshing. You had a question, Adakshipu?
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Shri Nitai Mai Pashashi Ki Jai. Yeah, you were saying that when we eat the humble pie, it doesn't taste so good, but then after a while, it starts to taste good.
Yes.
And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, when faults in others misguide you and delude you, Have patience and introspect. Find faults in yourself. Know that others cannot harm you unless you harm yourself. So I was just thinking that's an interesting kind of expanding that point, that the humble pie doesn't taste so sweet. But if you can get used to, instead of finding faults with other people, which is generally what a person does that's proud, a person that becomes genuinely humble, then he looks at himself to see where the faults are. And then it's interesting that Bhaktisiddhanta is saying that others cannot harm you unless you harm yourself. So you harm yourself by being proud and by finding faults in others. And if you don't find faults in others and you just find them in yourself, then people can't harm you, which is interesting, isn't it? Because you'd think that if people are going to find fault with me, that will harm me. But that doesn't harm you. Finding faults in others is the thing that harms you.
Yeah, it's interesting that in spiritual life, the what is intuitive on material platform is completely opposite what it is in a spiritual life. So I think that people fault finding with us, as you say, will harm us. But actually, Bhaktisiddhanta, there was like a very strong critic who was always criticizing him. When he died, devotees came to Bhaktisiddhanta to enthusiastically announce, that your greatest critic has died. And he was crying. And, devotees couldn't understand, why are you crying? He said, this person is my friend. He kept me, kind of humble, by fault finding. He was considering that he's my friend because it didn't allow me to become proud. Yes.
So how long does it take to get to that point? If you're a devotee, you've been practicing for a couple of years, then can you start applying that immediately, or do you have to wait for like 30 years before you're strong enough to incorporate that type of a proactive humility?
But in the beginning, it starts by cultivating service attitude, because this is described, the route to taste is Vaishnav Seva. It is the age of Vaishnav Seva. So access to the holy name and access to the taste for humble pie, it comes through service attitude. So if you're always enthusiastic to serve, if it becomes our meditation, how I can serve devotees, how I can serve Guru, and this becomes like constantly we're thinking how to apply ourselves in that way. And then slowly but surely we start getting the glimpses of the taste of the holy name, and also the beauty of Krishna. Krishna will smile at us sometimes, because when you're in a good consciousness, you come to see the deities. The deities look so effulgent. It looks like Lord Nityananda is smiling at you after you like a very sincerely served, or spiritual master smiles at you in a picture or personally. Then that becomes very enlivening. And then although it's so it feels almost like traumatic to be humble, for a conditioned soul with a big false ego. When we start to, taste a little bit of the holy name and Krishna's beauty, then we think this is actually the price to pay to get Krishna, and therefore we become attracted to the idea. And all if somebody is genuinely humble, it is very, very attractive. You see, some of great devotees that we have in our movement now, who, did become like a genuinely humble, and speaking about it and describing it. By associating with that, you start becoming attracted to the principle. And therefore, it is, it shouldn't remain theoretical, it's something that we all read. That hopefully we all are, can practice it and can exemplify it, and then other people can start becoming attracted. It doesn't remain just theoretical that you read in the books and you can't find a humble person in a temple. Yes, Ru.
Mahaprabhu was saying that in ISKCON we've imbibed certain things, like we understand the importance of book distribution, to some degree, and Prashadam, and being there for Mangalati and chanting 16 rounds. He said, but there's some things we haven't imbibed yet, like humility. So the problem with being proud is that you don't see there's a problem. It takes a long time before you start realizing, because pride, by its very nature, covers your ability to see that you have it, and then it can be like, quite a few years down the line, and you suddenly look back and think, well, actually, I'm not that humble, And yeah, he was saying, I mean, he was being humble saying it, but he said it took him over 30 years before he decided he needed to work on it.
Mhm.
And what made him think of doing it was he was introduced to a Baba in Varshana, and he gets up at 3 and he chants till 3 p.m. every day. And they took him to meet him, and they said, this is Mahatma Prabhu. He travels around the world and he preaches. And the Baba said to Mahatma, please bless me. And Mahatma said he was just so overwhelmed at how humble he was, And then he thought, I'd like to have that quality as well, So the quicker you get it, probably the better. Don't prolong the agony.
Yeah, ultimately we are looking for happiness and this transcendental bliss and pure love. So that is synonymous, and sometimes we say, maybe there is like a lack of love in my life, or sometimes people say there's a lack of love in the temple and etc. But the love means humility. If you can cultivate it yourself, and if you have the love yourself, and you want to be the instrument of that love, so then you will see in others good, appreciate good in others, and cultivate the humility, exemplify it for other people. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Gauranga.
So I have a question kind of on this topic. You were saying how it's a materialist mindset to want to be God and to think, I'm God, put yourself in the center. But then there's also a material mindset of thinking, like having no self-confidence. And this is different to humility. So could you talk about this, please?
Mm-hmm. Like low self-esteem versus humility. Yeah, humility means is not to be self-absorbed, because the person with who is very puffed up, and a person with a low self-esteem is also always thinking, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, and I'm this. So he's still thinking about oneself all the time, and it can be shifting from one thing to another as well. Like at one point you do something well, you become very proud, and you're thinking all the time about that, or you're telling others about that, and at other times you fail, and then you're always thinking how you failed, and you're telling to others about that. So it's kind of this self-absorbed. uh, Bhakti Tirtha Swami was saying, and Sachinandan Swami was quoting him as well, was saying that humility means not to think less of yourself, but think about yourself less, if you know what I mean. Or if you know what he means. That the mission of spiritual master, the service to the Vaishnavas, okay, I have this and that and a third fault, but the way to do it, to deal with it, is not just to lament about it, or, I'm so proud or envious or whatever, but actually become absorbed in the solution. The solution is to become absorbed in the serving devotees, chanting the holy name, hearing and chanting, and etc. And that will become purified. Will become purified. So another meaning for KC, often we translate KC and abbreviate, that means Krishna consciousness. But also KC means Krishna confident. So you can see Prabhupada was actually, although he was more humble than a blade of grass, and he expressed that many times, when he was in action, when he was serving and preaching, you can see he was very, very confident. He was very, very Krishna confident, almost like a lion. And he was expressing this confidence, and it was a confidence in spiritual master, confidence in Krishna. And we even read here today in Lilamrita, that Krishna will give you intelligence, just like I was not prepared to answer all these questions, but Krishna gives intelligence. So very, very, very humble. Know that nobody could defeat Prabhupada. But he was giving full credit to Krishna, and he was very confidently answering those questions, and like very powerfully. He was defeating so many people. It's like you can't find anybody who's so expert in answering questions. And Prabhupada was giving full credit to Krishna simultaneously. So I don't know if that clarifies the question. Are there any other comments or questions?
Generally, when you hear that someone's finding fault in you, it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction that you immediately find fault in them, without even thinking about it. It's just the way that we're wired, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's our default that we'll defend, and it's considered the most prominent of all the animal propensities: eating, mating, sleeping. Defending is the most, because you defend your eating and your sleeping and your mating. So defending yourself is the strongest one. But it's interesting. There's this expression that says if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And in the same way, if you're not trying to be humble, then you're going to be proud.
That makes sense. No, somebody was asked Radhanath Swami, how are you so humble? And he said that I practiced it. So yeah, practice makes perfect. And it's interesting as well that humility and tolerance as well is one of the important qualities of those who have humility or who are trying to practice humility. So when there is these things, a provocation, somebody says something, and etc., that kind of seems to be harming us or harming the false ego. Be able to tolerate, the faults and mistakes and provocations and etc. is also something that leads us to humility, that we're kind of able to grasp ourselves and tolerate when that provocation happens. And in Krishna book, Prabhupada says that the greatness, and that is actually I can't remember who said that in Krishna book, that the greatness of a person can be estimated by how they are able to tolerate provoking situations. So the tolerance is also leads into humility. Anything else, people?
I have a question regarding the material exhaustion. I remember a few chapters back when Narada Muni was being cursed by Prajapati Daksha. Then Prajapati Daksha was saying that basically, you can't make these children renounce because they've not gone through material life already. But Prabhupada was kind of throwing that out in his purport and saying that the material energy is so strong that no matter how much somebody tries to enjoy it, and they find that they're not enjoying it, they won't cease to continue on that. So I wonder how we can connect these two.
Thank you. So yeah, we see that Kunti Maharani, she's saying, unless one is materially exhausted and is very puffed up about one's parentage or some position and etc., wealth, fame, all those things that one cannot take seriously to Krishna consciousness unless it's kind of materially exhausted. And then on the other hand, Daksha is saying that one has to, seem to be saying similar thing. And while Narada Muni was preaching to the boys who seem to may not be materially exhausted, but he preached to them, and Daksha was saying, they are not materially exhausted. So how to kind of piece all these things together? It's one can become material exhausted. Of course, material exhausted and troubles is gonna be there to some extent for everybody, even Kali Yuga, even if one has got very good karma, but you can see that not all those who are materially exhausted or, get fed up, that they take to Krishna consciousness. Some of goes to some other traditions, or some people just go to psychologist, and psychologist, when you're materially exhausted, psychologist will try to patch you up and convince you. Panchatattva is smiling because he knows this is studying this. Try to patch it up and try to convince you. No, you actually can enjoy. That's the main thing of a psychologist, is to kind of help you to process the trauma that made you like depressed and put you back on the same path that brought you to the being materially exhausted. Is what you do with that exhaustion, and who do you approach to deal with it. If you approach a devotee and submissively hear from a devotee, then you can maintain and again like a reality of material exhaustion, that you lose the hopes to material enjoy. So if you go to psychologist, you go to some person who maybe some other tradition will convince you that you can enjoy in a different way. That's not doesn't give you a favor, because eventually it's gonna fail again. You're gonna come to that same point in this life or the next. But to truly material exhaust yourself, like we read yesterday in Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says there is no happiness in this material world. So can we accept that? Can be humble enough to accept the vision of a pure devotee who came from transcendental world, who are experiencing unlimited happiness? Can we accept, how much we have to be beaten again and again, our false ego beaten, our by own mind, beaten by other living entities, by the natural phenomena of the rain and clouds and etc. How much we have to be beaten until and hearing from pure devotee who says the same thing. So can we have a first class intelligence or 10 class intelligence? It is just everything is hammering us for material energy, and the devotee is explaining to us there is no happiness in material world. Can we accept that and become very, very serious in Krishna consciousness, and don't be lackadaisical when it comes to chant our holy name and cry for Krishna's mercy? And can we be determined enough to keep our sadhana strong every day, to keep reminding us of this fact, because the forgetfulness is always creeping in, forgetting all the troubles and the miseries that we went through. So we should embrace, and is technically, speaking about humility, are we really prepared to constantly hear from a pure devotee and accept what they are saying, instead of accepting the limited, compromised vision of ourselves that is compromised by false ego, the mode of ignorance and passion? Can we accept the vision of the pure devotee to be able to then see things as they are? And that is the true material exhaustion, when we become convinced that there is no happiness in the material world and the only happiness is in the spiritual world. Grantarachi Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande,
His Grace Raghunath Bhatta Prabhu ki.
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki.